all, this is going to be kind of an experiment. It's not going to be edited. I'm not going to edit this. It's just going to be rough. And because I have a camera that's not super fancy, it'll probably be kind of the focus will be take a lot of work. But what I thought I'd talk to you all today about is Donald Duck comics. I know I've talked to some people online who are trying to learn German. And I think you could use this for Italian too, and probably for maybe for Spanish, possibly for Portuguese, definitely for Italian. I think Dutch you could use it for. This is a way you could practice learning the language with some characters you're familiar with and some stories that you probably won't get to see in English. So before I get started on what Donald Duck comic books are from my limited US knowledge in Europe, I thought I'd show you some Donald Duck comics in English because that's where it all got started. Now, we all know Donald Duck from the cartoons. We've all seen Donald in there. And, you know, he's who he is. In the cartoons, he's usually, you know, you kind of feel for him, but you also kind of feel like he got what was coming to him usually because he's really kind of a jerk. He's an everyman kind of jerk. Like, he messes up in very relatable ways, but he's still kind of a jerk. And his nephews are kind of, like, they're always getting in trouble. They're really kind of, you know, I guess you would call them, like, scamps. They're not particularly responsible. They're always trying to, you know, dodge school, play hooky, that kind of thing. They're always playing jokes on Donald, some of which are pretty cruel. But, so that's the Donald most people know. Now, the Donald that I like, and that a lot of people who, if you talk to them and they say they're a Donald Duck fan, like a fan, like not I like Donald Duck, but I am in I am a Donald Duck fan, or I'm in Donald Duck fandom. This is the Donald Duck they're talking about. Carl Barks Donald Duck. There is nothing. I'm really passionate about Carl Barks Donald Duck. I'm not as passionate as there are people who are in, like, Donald Duck societies and do amateur scholarship on Carl Barks, amateur, like, fantasy anthropology on Duckburg and the Duck's World. In Germany, there's a club called the Donaldists who do that. And if you look on German Amazon, you'll find, like, books about religion in Entenberg. Entenberg is Duckburg. Entenhausen. Entenhausen is Duckburg. You'll find books about religion in Entenhausen and about family relationships and about, you know, vehicles, encyclopedias of Donald Duck Society that amateurs have come up with to try to explain why the duck world is the way it is. That's pretty funny to me. I'm never that intense about things. I'm really more a person who's like, I really like this, and that's all you get from me. So Carl Barks was really, if you watched DuckTales, and you probably did if you were my age, and if you're younger now since it's come back, you know that the Ducks, Scrooge McDuck and Donald Duck and Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and all of their friends and fellow cast members all live in Duckburg. And Duckburg kind of has a relatively rich history, and Scrooge McDuck goes all over the world and goes on adventures and searches for treasure and wealth, and Donald Duck comes along, and Huey, Dewey, and Louie come along, and it's all very, actually, quite developed. It's quite a developed world. That world that's completely separate from the original Disney Donald Duck cartoons was invented almost entirely by Carl Barks. He's a guy who, I believe, let's see if it always has an intro, so where it talks about the dates for his comics. Because I always forget when he started. When did he start? Tunnel Vision. See, you've got some academic notes kind of in the back of this one, which I think is funny. People talking about the layout, talking about his choices in storytelling, and basically talking about how they like them. That's what it all boils down to, how much they like them. But 1950s, I think that was about right. Carl Barks was an anonymous artist for Donald Duck Comics. He started working I believe in the 1950s, probably a little earlier. And he started really developing Duckburg. Like, nobody was paying attention to the Donald Duck comics. It wasn't important to Disney Studios at that time, like it is now, to control and monitor necessarily every aspect of their brand. They just wanted these comics out. They wanted people reading them with their characters. So he had a lot of free range. He could pretty much do what he wanted, short of, making them not, like, wholesome and Disney-ish. And he did. He really went for it. Like, under his writing, Duckburg developed in Hausen in Germany, and Duckburg became a thing. He went into the history of Duckburg. He went into Scrooge McDuck's past life. Scrooge McDuck went from being a miser to being... He really developed Scrooge McDuck. He was the first person to have Scrooge in a comic story. He established the character and then developed it. He made Scrooge more than a miser. He made him this actually relatively crusty, but down under all that, a genuinely good person who traveled the world in search of wealth and was really actually enjoyed adventuring. Maybe he would never admit that he enjoyed it for itself and not for the wealth. A person who actually was not entirely... He takes advantage of his relatives, but he's not entirely a bad person. Barks made him that adventurer. Barks made him a person who was enthusiastic about the world, who really stood up against it. He was kind of a vision of the self-made man. Admittedly colonialist, but still, he had grit, he was tough, he enjoyed getting out there in the world, he was willing to get his hands dirty. And then, in the end, he became estranged from his relatives because he became so wealthy. And it's a very human story, and Barks set that up for Scrooge, and then, as Scrooge kind of became his own thing, took over and had his own adventure stories as time went on, Donald Duck and Huey, Dewey, and Louie began to evolve too, and Donald became more of an everyman. He's kind of a schmuck. He's a little bit lazy. Sometimes he looks for get-rich-quick schemes, but generally he's kind of just a guy who has his own house in the suburbs. He has a car that breaks down all the time. He has his nephews to take care of and make sure they go to school. He doesn't ever get paid enough for the odd jobs he does for Uncle Scrooge. He's always looking for something else. He tends to go along on adventures and help Scrooge. Sometimes he goes along on adventures of his own. In the early comics Barks wrote, he was still more of a gag character. But yeah, he definitely became his own character, his own adventure as time went on, and he's very appealing this way. Very much an everyman, very, very much, life gets him down sometimes, but he's never completely flattened. And Huey, Dewey, and Louie really changed too. From being really fairly irritating pranksters, they eventually developed into really responsible, very aware, they're the conscience of the group. They actually developed from pranksters into the conscience of, in many ways, Donald Duck and Scrooge. When Donald Duck and Scrooge go over the edge and hunting for wealth or coming up with a plan, get-rich-quick plan, Huey and Dewey and Louie are often there to reel them in or to help them out. Huey, Dewey, and Louie are still pretty much interchangeable. There's nothing that differentiates them from each other, even in Barks' world. But they become part of the Junior Woodchucks, which I think the Junior Woodchucks are on DuckTales. I think so. So you should know the Junior Woodchucks. The Junior Woodchucks are a lot like the Boy Scouts, and the Junior Woodchucks are they're taught to be responsible, they're taught to be resourceful, they know all about nature and history and their local area. So Huey, Dewey, and Louie are usually the ones who, if people need history knowledge, if they need some local knowledge of, animals or nature, if they need somebody to remind people to care about history and animals and nature, and to be responsible and to care about others, that's what they do. And that's really different than the cartoons. They have the Junior Woodchucks guidebook that they carry with them, and it's like a Boy Scouts guidebook, but it always has something they need. It pretty much has the sum of all knowledge in it. So that's Barks' World, and I really like Barks' World. I think it was pivotal, a big deal for a lot of kids who were growing up in the 50s. Like I said, Barks was anonymous, so nobody knew. They just knew that some of the stories were better than other Donald Duck comics. So they called him the good duck artist. And actually fandom, through letters and just research and networking back before the internet and really being able to communicate easily, fandom tracked Barks down. They said, "Who's the good duck artist?" And eventually they found him. And now we know that Carl Barks was the good duck artist. And his work has become a big deal. Like, it's the foundation for Duckburg. It's the foundation for Donald Duck fandom. As you can see here, I just happened to open to a page that has Bombi the Zombie. It was part of its time. I mean, he was a white dude. Whoops, I'm tickling my microphone. Sorry about that. He was a white dude writing in the 1950s, and you can definitely tell it in his work. So here we have Bombi the Zombie, sorry, who cursed who's part of a curse against Uncle Scrooge. Uncle Scrooge tried to colonize, essentially, to buy some lands for resources, and I forget if they specified which country in Africa, and as a result, the land cursed him to be followed by Bombi the Zombie forever. So this is the nephews running into Bombi the Zombie decades later and going like, who is this? So you can see his work had problems. It had the problems I think you would expect from somebody who is, like I said, they were at the top of the heap. They were white, male, probably isolated from many cultural struggles at all. So it does have that problem, and I definitely don't want to overlook that. But in general, I really like it. It's he writes his ducks are articulate. Sometimes they're well read. Sometimes their stories talk about, things in society at the time. It's this one he's playing cookies. So this is back when Huey, Dewey, and Louie. These are some of the early ones. Huey, Dewey, and Louie are still kind of tricksters. What's this one? He's trying to get scared. I forget what this one was all about. Why was he trying to calm down and do things like, I don't remember. This one he's on a dude ranch. But you can see the size of the bubbles, right? These are not ducks that can't talk. These are not the this is not the Donald that just makes noises you can't understand. He's an articulate guy. He's always trying to find his way around to things. Oh, this is his lucky, I think, cousin? Like, there's a whole family tree, and it gets weird. Gladstone Gander. Oops, sorry, bumped the mic. Gladstone Gander is also a character. I don't remember if Barks developed Gladstone, but Gladstone is, yes, Donald's cousin. And Gladstone is super lucky. Like, Gladstone has never had to work a day in his life, because whenever he does something, it turns out fantastically. Like, he wins every contest he enters. He's essentially, like, he can be lazy. He can do anything he wants. Gladstone shows up in quite a few stories. But that's Barks' world. It really developed. It's really quite articulate. It does suffer from the racism of the time. Here we have, let's see. Oh, he's trying to learn trivia so he can be in a trivia contest. Here he's visited Santa. So that's an early volume. This is also early, and this one has the first story that my favorite character, Uncle Scrooge, showed up in. In this one, Uncle Scrooge is still very much a miser and very ostracized from his family, so he's got a lot of developing to do. But that was the first story he ever appeared in. I don't think this one has a lot of this. Oh, here we are. Here's one of the when we started doing adventure stories. So that really became what Barks did, was these adventure stories. Donald Duck and the Ghost of the Grotto. You can't see the title because it's way up there. There we are. Ghost of the Grotto. So there they go. They're off. Donald has the darndest jobs. Like, there's no continuity really. So each job, like here he's a seaweed gatherer in the West Indies. Like, he'll have jobs like that. He'll be like a pearl diver, or he'll be, a mechanic, and it's just kind of random what he's chosen to be each comic. And in this one, he has to figure out a whole ghost story about this sunken ship, and an armored man who's living there, who's actually from way in the past, and I think that's one of the earlier adventure stories. And the thing is, he always goes on the adventures, and it never ends up making him rich. Like, he always ends up doing the right thing and saving the day, but he doesn't get rich. Like, for this one, at the end, they've discovered gold, but alas, the gold legally does not belong to Donald. It belongs to somebody else. So he's done all that work, solved the mystery, and he's still never going to get rich. And you can see, here's a good one. This is actually a nice little article that was in the back. You can see here, and you can kind of see here because my camera is so sucky, that there's a lot of, he actually does a lot. Carl Barks was willing to do stuff with layout. So here's one of his layouts. You've got a rocket coming down here, and as it points out, this is realistic. This is almost like a war comic with this rocket coming down, hitting the ground, and then there's Donald running away from it in a very Donald way here, and then rocks falling on him, and he's fine. And it's a really dynamic layout. So Barks did a lot of things with layout. Like I said, he was free to do whatever he wanted. I think he was self-taught. Here he is. Carl Barks, the good duck artist. And he rolled with it. He rolled with it. There was nobody watching him, and him doing whatever he wanted. So like I said, people grew up on Donald Duck comics. I found some when I was a kid, living somewhere in Colorado, and the grocery store, for some reason, had some Donald Duck comics. I think they were re-releasing them. They do that occasionally. Like, this is a special collection. There are all kinds of special collections. Sometimes they release them as individual comics. And I think I just happened to run into a time when they were releasing them as individual comics. And I loved them. But I didn't, you're a little kid, and the net was not around at the time, so I didn't know what they were. I didn't know how to find more. So I just was really happy whenever there happened to be one somewhere around or at the grocery store. And I never got to read all of them. I still haven't read all of them as an adult, but I read a lot more. So that was how I found them. And nowadays, Carl Barks stuff became enormously popular in the U.S., and then it became quite popular in Europe and Germany. There was an artist, and I'll tell you, I think her name was Erica Fuchs. Erica, and then last name Fox, and it would be Fox in English. Fuchs, Fuchs. Translated Barks comics into German. And she did, apparently, I've not read her translations. I've not read Carl Barks originals in German. She apparently did a fantastic job. Like, she made the ducks in a way her own too, and she made the translations very fluid, very literate. She came up with all kinds of new names for the ducks that fit more the German milieu. She adapted their references and things they made, and Germans loved it. I've read somewhere that Germans particularly loved Scrooge because Scrooge has so much money, and he doesn't benefit from it. He just hoards it. He doesn't have a better life because he has money. He isn't happy because he has money. He just has it. And especially after World War II, Germany was going through things like horrible inflation. Money often didn't mean anything. You could play, like, kids were playing with money, like sheaves of money, using them to build. They talk about them using them to build, build little toy buildings and things, playing with them like blocks. So there was a period when money didn't mean anything in Germany either. So apparently Scrooge is really appealing because of that. So Scrooge is really popular. Carl Barks comics were really popular. Donald was really popular in Germany. He also, I don't know the history of this one, but he's extremely popular. Donald Duck in particular is extremely popular in Italy. I've heard that some of the characters are also, I think, popular in South and Central America, though I don't know as much about that. But here we go. Continuing on looking at Barks stuff. Barks obviously had fans. Tons of fans, of which I'm one. But this is really cool. This is The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck by Don Rosa, who for some reason I always want to call Rosa Parks, which I would be quite thrilled to read Rosa Parks' Uncle Scrooge comics. That would probably be an interesting new take on things. but I don't think she was writing them. I think it's just that Rosa is such an odd name, and as a kid who grew up, hearing about Rosa Parks all the time in grade school and things, I think that my brain just goes, oh, that's the only Rosa. This is Don Rosa. He kind of inherited in a lot of ways the Good Duck comic, the Good Duck artist mantle, and he even went further with it, I think. He clearly loves Scrooge, and I love these comics. Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, and then there's Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck Companion over here, which has a few more stories. What he did, and I think he writes freestanding Uncle Scrooge and Donald Duck adventures that aren't related directly to Carl Barks' work either, but I haven't read those. What he did was take all of Barks' stories about Scrooge and go, how can I fit these together? Because in a lot of Barks' stories, Scrooge talks about incidents in his past, things he did when he was younger. He'll talk about making his fortune in the Klondike, or, that time he was, let's see, where is he in all of these? Was he gold mining in Africa? In South Africa, maybe? There was some kind of gold rush on the African continent he went to. Or he'll talk about his family back in, Scotland, or he makes a lot of references in Carl Barks comics to a very adventurous, very full life. And Don Rosa took all of those references and made a continuous, kind of an epic about Scrooge's life up until he became the Scrooge McDuck we know, with his money vault in Duckburg. And it's a really, it's not adult, but it's not a story. I loved it as a kid when, again, I found a few issues and I treasured them and never found the rest of the story. And as an adult, I found them and I was just thrilled. I liked them a ton as a kid. I love them a ton as an adult because, one, they go all over the world, real places, some adventures that aren't real, but a lot of them kind of fall into real history, real gold rushes, real Scotland, all made up. Let's see, we were in Australia, in the Outback, in the Klondike, in the Gold Rush. It's all kind of set in the real world and kind of not, and it all makes Scrooge a really, really sympathetic, really human character. He's not really a duck in this. He starts out as a poor kid in Scotland. I think he's digging peat for his family. He has a sister. Does he have two sisters? I forget. I think he has two sisters. His mom and his dad. And they're really poor. And they love one another. And it's a sweet family. And he goes off to, two sisters. He has two sisters. He goes off across the world to make his fortune, and he runs into a lot of problems. He's naive at first, and he gets kind of, screwed over by being naive, so he becomes harsher, much harder person, and he falls in love, which I love the love story. It's very sweet. I wish it ended differently. He meets family. He goes back to his family and realizes that he's completely estranged from them now. He's become a hard person, a person who's divorced from his past. And then he has to decide, kind of what to do with himself. Does he improve? Does he not? And eventually, he meets his nephews, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. And he meets his, not his nephews, I guess there's grandnephews. Meets his own, here we go. Meets his own nephew, Donald, and starts becoming, and it leaves it right off of that first story Barks wrote, where Scrooge was really a miser, alone, and isolated in his money vault. And it suggests that finally, after becoming estranged from his entire family, it ends with him opening up again, and then entering Carl Barks' era. So he kind of writes this whole amazing prologue loved Karl Barks' work, and I really highly recommend it. It tends to go out of print, which is really frustrating. I think these are actually worth, these go for like 50 or 60, there's he's writing, there he's meeting Teddy Roosevelt, and I forget what they do together, but they do something, and but there are other editions that tend to be in print at any one time. Like this edition might not be in print anymore, but I think Fantagraphics has some editions in print now. Anyway, these are amazing. I love them. They're very American somehow, the whole self-made man millionaire thing. If you ever want a really American story, that's definitely one. And now we come to the German ones. Look at that. These are the German ones. And they're not in order. I meant to get them in order for you so you can see how they match up together. I've got some of Donald Duck's hands down at the bottom. Here we go. No, there's Uncle Scrooge. 505, 506, 507, 508. Well, Uncle Scrooge is going to be here and there. I see his coat. That's probably that. But you can see here. You see how they match up? I don't know what Uncle Scrooge is doing back there. But I'm missing the first one in this month. So I just started subscribing like partway through the year. So I don't have 504, which was the first one for this year. But you can see how those spines form a picture in which they're looking at bookshelves with other editions of this book. Now this is Lustiges Taschenbuch. Lustiges Taschenbuch is a publication that I think has been going on in Germany since the 60s, if I remember reading correctly. Lustiges Taschenbuch is a monthly digest full of Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge, and there's usually at least one Mickey Mouse story in each one too. So these are something like, I was thrilled. I went to Germany. The first one I saw was in Austria. This is my first one. 351. So it's been a few years since I saw that one. Volltreffer, which means basically goal. This is fuzzy. You can't really tell, but it's flocked. That's pretty much why I bought it, because I was in Austria. I was a teenager. I think this was my first time overseas on a school trip. And I saw this and I was like, it's Donald Duck and it's fuzzy. This is amazing. I don't know what it says. And that's something I will do. I will buy things that I don't understand in other languages if I think they look cool. Never mind that I can't understand them. And that's what I did here. I picked it up. And I honestly didn't think I would ever necessarily be able to read it. Because I didn't think I'd learn German. I was learning French at the time. But I kept it, and I still have it. And this is the first thing I read in German. First Lustiges Taschenbuch. So Lustiges Taschenbuch, again, started in the 1960s. It's a monthly digest of Donald Duck, Scrooge, and Mickey Mouse comics. And it really kind of takes its cue from Karl Barks' universe, but they're more casual. They're more funny. There's a little less seriousness. They're not usually set in real-world environments, although occasionally you'll get a story that is. Scrooge is still a little bit more of a miser. He's less of a well-rounded person than he is in Karl Barks and Don Rosa's work. Donald Duck is very sympathetic. He's occasionally mean, but he's much more Karl Barks' Donald Duck. And Huey, Dewey, and Louie are very much Karl Barks' Huey, Dewey, and Louie. They're wearing, see, you can see it, he's wearing his fuzzy raccoon Junior Woodchuck hat right there. They're very much in his Junior Woodchuck bandana. They're very much the good part, the conscience of the group, and Donald is the let's see if we can make money and let's impress Daisy and stuff person. I like him a lot. I've always liked Donald. So they take a cue from the Karl Barks universe and use a lot of the Karl Barks characters, but they're a little less serious, a little more pulpy. This one's all beaten up. I have one here that's all beaten up. Winterspaß mit Donald Duck, which means winter fun with Donald Duck. That one I got from a used bookstore randomly in the US. But again, I saw this first one in Austria, brought it home, didn't think I'd ever read it. Fast forward about a decade, 6, 8, it's anywhere from I think 8 to 8 years later, and I've learned German. Woo! And I've been to Germany many times, and there's a whole long story behind that. which I will not get into. It was confusing but fun. And then I saw these again. I was like, oh, what are these? I saw them everywhere. They have big ads in the train stations for them. You can find them pretty much at any bookstore and any newsstand. They're going to have these Lustiges Taschenbuch. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. What are these? Are they just reprints of old comics? They're not. They are, in fact, they're entirely new comics. Usually, this is a good, you can see there are like 10 to 11 stories in each book, each volume. And they're usually written by Italians, for some reason. Most, when you look through, you'll see, well, this one's Fleming Anderson and Prince Paulson, which I think is that Norse or Dutch? There are some, written in, the Netherlands, maybe Norway, are kind of the second most common writers of these stories. I have that wrong. But most of them are by Italians. Let's see if I can find an Italian name. Here we go. There's more. Carlo Panaro has written quite a few of them, I've noticed. I actually write down the authors afterwards and the artists for each one, so I can just kind of get a sense of which ones I like and which ones I don't. But most of these are by Italians. And they're written profusely. There's another set of Italian names. A lot of these stories are written years before they're published. This one, so you can't really see it. It says created 2013. So clearly people are pushing these stories out pretty fast and then putting them kind of in a pool that's pulled from to make each magazine. But they're primarily Italian stories translated into whatever language Lustiges Taschenbuch or its related publication is being published in, because there are similar publications in a number of countries. Some of them, again, are, I think, Dutch or Norse, and they're translated. Every once in a while, you'll see one that's by a name that sounds like it's from an English native-speaking country. There was one, the last one. Where is it? And the funny thing about it was very Carlos Barks. So I was like, oh, yes. You can tell it's written by an American because they grew up on strictly the Barks stories. Byron Erickson down here. Because in this one, they actually go to a real place. They go off on an adventure to Colorado, to the Anasazi dwellings, and have an adventure that involves discoveries in the Anasazi. And there's a real history as well as completely made up stuff, which is very Barks. And that's the only story so far that's been that Carl Barksian, and it was written by an English speaker, which made me go, aha, that makes perfect sense. But most of them are Italian. Almost all of them, you'll always find the names are primarily Italian. The art's kind of, it's always pretty fast. Some of the artists are better than others. A few of them are awful. Look at the names of the ones that are awful. Like, they draw the ducks with their mouths open. There's one pose they have. A few of them are cute. This one looks like this one might be cute. They'll put in a lot of little background details, and the characters will be really expressive, and the art's actually really cute. So you get a wide range. Let's take a look at some of the characters. Who have they got in here? Because the characters are different, too. A little different. Alright, so we got Donald. I don't know where he is. He's out in the... We got Scrooge. Scrooge is going like, oh, I've got a job for you. That's what he does in most comics. He's like, you don't seem to be doing anything important. Donald, you're going to go do this for me for a small wage. And Donald goes off and risks his life for a pittance. And has an adventure. Donald is still Donald in Germany. Huey, Dewey, and Louie are not. They are Tick, Tack, and Track, I think. So Tick, Tack, and Track, I think, are their names in German. And they're I don't know why they're Tick, Tack, and Track. I think that was because they all have the names Erika Fuchs, that original translator, gave them. Here we have a Mickey Mouse and Goofy story. This is apparently hardcore Donald Duck fans consider Mickey Mouse and Goofy to live in a different universe. Like, they're not overlapping universes with the Duck stories. And Donald Duck and Goofy, usually, Mickey's the brains, and Goofy's not dumb. Like, he's not dumb like he is in the comics. He's a little silly, and he's a little more casual than Mickey, and he gets into more trouble, but he's not stupid at all. He's kind of Mickey's second in command. He's always helping him out. And they usually solve mysteries. They're usually doing something normal. And then they fall into a mystery. And then they solve it. And for some reason, he's on very good terms with the police office. They know him there. They're always like, oh, hey, Mickey, you gonna solve another crime? Mickey's like, yes. So, they have... no, this is a two-parter. Occasionally they'll have a long story that's divided into two parts. So the Mickey Mouse one is a two-parter this time. I don't like... I've read Mickey comics when I was a kid occasionally, where he was kind of that adventurer, that crime solver detective. I didn't get much of a kick out of them, but actually I've enjoyed some of the ones in Lustiges Taschenbuch. Here's Baptiste. Baptiste is nowhere in anything that American that I've ever run into. Perhaps he is elsewhere. He's Scrooge's butler. He's very loyal to Scrooge. He's a good guy. He usually screws up a little bit in security somehow, but he still hangs around. Oh, we've got Phantomius. Here's another fun part. Donald Duck in Europe has a hero alter ego. He has a special supercar and a cape and a mask, and he goes around and calls himself Phantomius, and he solves crimes, and nobody knows he's also Donald Duck. I like Phantomius too. There's some really fun, serious, I'd say they're serious comics about Phantomius himself, where he ends up being a sci-fi kind of hero and the main character, and has his own saga with continuity, and it's a lot of fun. I only read part of it, and I need to finish it at some point. I think it's called PVK New Adventures? PK New Adventures, maybe? PK Adventures. That's from the Italian name, because they were originally Italian. Let's see. Oh, here's this guy. Can you see him? The one with the whiskers and the top hat? I always forget his name. He's Scrooge's rival millionaire. He's another millionaire in Duckburg, but he uses really crooked techniques. He cheats, he lies, he hurts people. He's kind of Scrooge's foil. He does all the things Scrooge would like people to kind of think. Scrooge would like people to think he's bad, hard. Scrooge is not actually hard. He just really likes money. But this guy is crooked, and he'll do anything it takes to get money. And he always gets beaten by Scrooge, of course. Is his name Clever? I think his name is Clever in German. Clever something. So, Phantomius, Scrooge, Clever. You've seen Baptiste. We're missing some of the core guys here. The Beagle Boys are a big deal. They're called the Panzerknacker, or the safe crackers. They have their granddad is always telling the younger Beagle Boys stories about how he got out of jail and was awesome in the past, and the Beagle Boys are always getting into trouble. I'm surprised how much I like the Beagle Boys stories. The art in them is usually pretty cute and expressive, and they just seem they're kind of cute. They're kind of helpless and ridiculous. I'm surprised I like them. This character shows up sometimes. Darned if I remember his name. He's really ridiculous. He's always trying to start his own businesses but he's really, really lazy and gets nothing done. He's definitely a clown. But he doesn't show up much. I don't know if he counts as a recurring character, really. This is Sergei. I guess Sergei is that duck. I don't know how he relates to everybody. Here's Gyro Gearloose. He's in a lot of these comics, too. Gyro Gearloose is... what's his name? Dusseldusentrieb, I think, in German. And he's usually helping out. He manages Phantomius's tech tools. He invents them for Donald Duck's alter ego. And he's always helping out Scrooge with his security systems. Oh, come on, there gotta be some of the other... There are a few other characters I want to show you. The police chief. There are a lot of times stories about the police chief. And I can't really tell if he's a police chief in Entenhausen or if he's kind of his own little universe. But he's trying to solve kind of goofy things, goofy problems. And his crew never gets it right. Let's see. Why is Donald Duck dressed like a radio? This must be a kind of, maybe an alternate universe one. Because here we have records and Donald appears to be a reporter, maybe? So that's a little different. That's not usually a normal kind of story. A historical alternate universe. There's Dusel again. Gyro. You won't find Darkwing Duck. I don't think Darkwing Duck was a hit in Europe, alas. And again, if you argue with people, if you talk with people, they'll say that Darkwing Duck again is in a different universe than the McDucks. You won't find Launchpad. I think Launchpad was development specifically for DuckTales, and he's not a thing in any of the European comics. I don't think he was ever in Carl Barks stuff, too. Let me see if I can find you the other. There's Dusel again. I'm trying to find you the other characters who are recurring. Phantomius. Oh, here, this guy. This guy is interesting. What's his name again? I forget. He's unique. I don't think he was in anything Carl Barksy ever. He was created separately. No, that's Dusel. Okay, this guy's Dusel. Dusel? What is that? What's Gyro's name? I don't remember. Gyro Gearloose. I got his name wrong, but this is Dusel. Dusel is this... He reminds me, he's a very... Apparently, he was invented in the U.S. in a non-Carl Barks comic. But he really he feels super Italian. He feels like a Commedia dell'arte character, kind of like the clown. The clown who's kind of clever, but also gets in trouble all the time. He always wears this stocking cap and this red sweater, and he has these long, bits of hair. And he's super optimistic. He always thinks he can do things, and he always screws them up terribly, but it doesn't bother him at all. It just bothers everybody else. And, things actually usually end up working out well for him, even though he's messed them all up. So his life is just kind of a stream of oblivion that works out well. And Donald is usually like, what are you doing, man? Why am I stuck with you? But apparently he was developed in the U.S. as a character who was, really into, self-help and new agey things and always trying to do self-improvement. And he doesn't really feel like that in these comics. He definitely feels like just this kind of broad, slapsticky kind of character. But he's growing on me. I think he's called Fentry? Fentry something in English. I'd never seen him in anything in English. And here we are, Gustav. Oh, why do I always forget his name in English? I don't know why. I told you his name earlier, now I've forgotten it again. But in German, his name is Gustav. And he is the duck with all the luck. He's always lucky. And this one, for instance, he's just won a boat. Very handy. Just randomly in a drawing. And whenever Donald Duck will sometimes bring him along on an adventure because he needs his luck. If you have him along, things are probably going to go okay for you. You'll probably get screwed over yourself, but the general drift of things will be positive. But again, he's called Gustav in this one. In German, and if he and Donald are rivals in something, Donald always loses, and Gustav always wins, because he has the luck, and Donald doesn't. If they're working together, usually the entire enterprise will end well, but Donald will still come out losing somehow. Oh, hey! It's Professor Van Quack. Oh, right, Scrooge is called Dagobert, in German. But it's Professor Van Quack. He also is not called Professor Van Quack in these... What is he called? Primus. And if you know him from the Disney specials where he used to show us different subjects and be wacky, he's similar. He's still goofy. He has degrees in everything, literally. He has PhDs in all kinds of things. And Scrooge tends to use him as... for reference. He gets his opinions on things. So I think that's all of the main characters that show up. And I really like the variety. Here's one of the... I always like the art for some reason in the Beagle Boys comics. They're very bold and expressive, and the stories are cute. They never get up to bad crimes. I mean, they're Disney characters. But those are about all the characters. You can see there's a really wide range. Most of them hark back to Karl Barks's world, but some of them were later inventions, either Italian or American ones that were really taken up by Italians. Let's see, what else? And you can also see that there's it diverted some, like you have some Duckburg characters that just never became a thing in the European version. They were in the cartoon here, but never became popular or accepted in German comic books or European Donald Duck comic books. But I really recommend these if you're learning German, because you know the characters, right? They're made for kids, they're written for kids, although a lot of adults read them too, I think. And you know the characters. You know, if you're reading a story, you're like, okay, Tick, Tack, and Track are always going to have the solutions. Here they've got a net, and they've managed to capture the bad guy. They're always going to be the ones with the solutions. They're always going to be the conscience. You know that. You know that Gustav's always going to be the lucky one, and that he hates to actually do work. You know that. You know Donald. Everybody knows Donald's character. You know Scrooge's character. You know Professor Von Quack. You know how they act. You know what kind of stories they're going to be in. The Beagle Boys, you know what kind of stories they'll be in. And even if you're a little unfamiliar with these European versions, if you do a little reading online or look through a few volumes, you'll get an idea of it really quick. So I like them because you have a lot of hints to what should be going on. You can check your understanding by just thinking about, okay, is this what I think the characters would do in this instance? Is this what they would be talking about? Does this make sense for them? You can check that really easy. You can check your understanding. So I really recommend them. You can subscribe to them in the U.S. via, I think it's called German Language Publications. It's this really bare bones looking website, and I wasn't sure it would work, like it was legit, but you know, I signed up. It's about $100 per year, which is not that bad. You get 12 issues, and they come to my door reliably every month. About halfway through each month, you get a new one, and I really like getting them. They're really nice. They're just a nice break from adulting. They're a nice way to keep to just read something really relaxing in German, and you get funny things. Like you get. Occasionally they'll comment on environmentalism. There was one in a few issues back that was about, here it is, Tatort. Tatort is a famous German crime series that's been going on. I think it airs every Sunday, and it has been forever. And this is the Tatort symbol. Got a little crunched up there. But, so they had a story that was set, Tatort Entenhausen, Tatort Duckburg. A Tatort story in Duckburg, which is very German. So you'll get some stories that are very, like, culturally specific. You'll get stories where it just cracks me up to see Tick, Tack, and Track, Huey, Dewey, and Louie using cell phones. And, you know, Uncle Scrooge will be like, that's ridiculous. Why are we using smartphones? And then the smartphones will save the day. And that kind of thing is just really funny to me. Or they're looking stuff up on the net. It just seems so weird, and I love it. But, yeah. So you can subscribe to this for about $100. I think it's called German Language Publications. And then you'll get one every month. And it will be awesome. And you will learn German. One thing to keep in mind is a lot of time it is German translated out of Italian. So sometimes it's funky. I know I used to talk to a German-speaking friend of mine and be like, when I was first learning, like, what does that mean? And she'd be like, that is really weird German. So some of the German is a little clunky because it's translated. But it's not so clunky that it will be useless to you or that you won't figure it out. But yeah, Donald Duck comics. I smacked the mic, sorry. They're really fun. I like them in English. In German, they're really fluff, but I still recommend them. And they're a good way to learn and practice your German in a nice, oh wow, you're right. There's a lot of soccer, a lot of football in these, especially when the World Cup comes along. That's how I knew the World Cup took place in Russia this year, even though I don't follow sports, because in this title story, Donald went to Russia to watch the World Cup, And I was like, oh, it must be in Russia this year. They don't reference real places often, so it must actually be there. And it was. So, learn things from your Donald Duck comics. So yeah, I recommend reading these. They're a good source, a good kind of cultural, started in American stuff that we all know, and then became uniquely its own thing and is in German. So I recommend them. Check them out if you're learning. That's all I gotta say today. Donald Duck comics are cool. Have a good rest of your day.